Hello. Thanks, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Hill. I'm one of the APDs at University of Cincinnati. And today with Dr. McDonough, Dr. Axelson, and Dr. Grosso, we're going to be working our way through showing how we use Slack to help facilitate our version of III. And because two pun-filled titles are much better than one pun-filled title, the alternative title of this is The Slacker's Guide to III. You should have handouts at each table. What we would like you to do is go ahead and sign up for our Slack workspace because A, we're going to actually demonstrate using the Slack workspace while we're giving this lecture. And we're also going to have that available to you going forward in the future if you should have any questions that should come up after this didactic. Now, there's a QR code. You can use your phone's camera application to just look at that and then click on the link that it generates. Or if you have questions on how that actually works or don't know how that works, you can also send an email to grossoriley@gmail.com, and she will send you an invite link and get you kind of signed up and running. So, first of all, we don't own any stock in Slack, and Slack doesn't own any stock in us, so we have no financial conflicts of interest. Now, Individualized Interactive Instruction, or III, was introduced by the ACGME RRC several years ago, and basically said that you could replace up to 20% of your traditional conference didactics with this alternative form of education, which basically boils down to any educational activity that can meet these four requirements. One, it's got to be monitored by the program director. There's got to be some evaluation of the residents. Three, there's got to be some faculty oversight. And then you have to actually monitor the actual activity for its effectiveness. There's been a couple of published examples of what form other institutions have taken to accomplish this, but they mostly take the format of some individual residents choosing particular educational resources like a blog or a podcast or a book chapter, and then filling out a multiple choice question or writing a reflective essay. The form we have chosen to take to accomplish II is a virtual small group exercise. This is a form of asynchronous online discussion that obviously is well used within the distance learning educational structures. It has been used in health professions education as well. There was a review in 2013 by Jenny Thomas, which basically saw that there are 14 published iterations of asynchronous online discussions that were existing in the literature, and they were used in primarily nursing and medical student education. There's not a whole lot of literature out there about this particular form of educational activity within graduate medical education or certainly residency education. We like the form of the virtual small group exercise as a very promising technology because it fits very nicely with a social constructivist educational theory framework. And social constructivism basically says that learning is primarily centered around the learner and the experiences that they have. Learning is experiential. And socially, it is accomplished by the sharing of previous experiences, knowledge about disease processes, knowledge about patient cases that they have had, and the small group exercise really allows us to accomplish that. Our hope is that we can, through this, generate sort of deeper and more meaningful learning experiences through III, as opposed to simply just reading a book chapter or listen to a blog, listen to a podcast and filling out some questions. And we hope that basically this communication structure, which Slack helps facilitate, can really help us form up sort of a local community of practice, both within the residents and between the residents and the faculty, where there's sort of free sharing of experiences and ideas so that we can sort of address sort of all the shared common problems that we face every day in the emergency department. So what is Slack? Slack is a free social media communication file sharing platform. It is organized by workspaces. You can see this is, you'll see it here just in a little bit when we're going through the live demonstrations, but these are all the workspaces I have on the side. Each workspace has varying channels that you can create in there, and these channels are basically how we construct our small group exercises.
So we're going to change gears here a little bit and kind of go through some of the logistics of this. As a non-millennial, I am acutely aware more and more that I am not tech savvy, and I become less tech savvy with time. But this is actually pretty intuitive and works really well. And I was actually surprised at how even the faculty were able to embrace it just as much as the much more tech savvy residents. Essentially, we start off the month, we create a bunch of virtual small groups. And what you do is you create a private channel, and Riley's going to demonstrate kind of how some of this works. And on a private channel, only the people who are assigned to that channel can follow the discussion. And so we'll have about 6 residents and a faculty moderator for each small group. And thus we can kind of take the same topic and have about 6 conversations running simultaneously on the same subject. And what we found is that that format really helps because then each individual resident can more meaningfully contribute to the discussion rather than we have a residency program of 56 residents, and what we found in previous attempts at doing III was that like a couple of residents would get on and kind of deliver all the learning points such that there wasn't much left for other residents to contribute. The other nice thing about the small groups is that the junior residents feel a lot more empowered to kind of share and speak up and present their own thoughts and ideas because it's a small group as opposed to putting themselves out in front of the entire residency program. Riley is going to share an example of a facilitator guide. The way that we've tried a couple different formats of this. We originally tried an open-ended discussion on evidence-based non-narcotic pain management strategies, and that worked fine, but the residents really embraced the case-based format. And so what we've taken to doing is developing a case, and the facilitator guide will have basically the case fully laid out in it, and you can kind of see that up there. And it also includes educational goals and objectives for the entire month as well as for each individual week, because we usually carry these discussions out over a month's time. And it's nice because it helps direct the faculty moderators as to how to guide the discussion. You can just cut and paste stuff into Slack, like when the residents ask for an exam, you can just cut and paste the exam into the discussion, which works really well. And last month when we did the last iteration of this, the facilitator guide was actually developed by one of our senior residents as an education project, which was a cool learning experience for him in itself.
So let's talk a little bit now about some of the functionality of Slack that I think makes it particularly adept at facilitating small group discussion. If you were seated, for example, in grand rounds or in a setting like this, you may ask an open-ended question and want the audience to participate. You may want to call out an individual person in the audience and ask them a question. Slack allows you that functionality within the virtual small group setting. So, for example, if I wanted to start the conversation and open up an open-ended question, I could use the @channel command where everyone in the channel will get a notification that a question's been posed, and they'll be able to see that question and go in and answer that question. Similarly, if I wanted to call out an individual, I could type @Riley's name or anybody's individual name, and only that person will get a notification that they've been asked a question. So in that sense, it allows you to both focus in on individual participants if someone's not participating and you want to call them out, or if you just want to ask an open-ended question. Similarly, it allows responses very easily to previous posts or previous responses, and as you maybe noticed earlier, within those responses, it's very easy to drag and drop multimedia files, so whether that's a PDF file, Word document, videos, links to articles. Riley had put in the instructor's guide here. I don't know if you saw those. Very easy, just drag and drop it in. And then all those multimedia files are linked in the channel, so anyone in the channel now can go back and reference those files at any point in the discussion, which is nice. We also have screenshot captures up here of some previous examples of just interactions and people writing responses and then other people responding and calling out the person prior. Every time you or your channel gets a shout out or an you get a notification on your phone, and you can do different things with the notifications, but in general we found it best that all the residents just left all their notifications on so that they were always aware of any activity going on in any one individual channel.
And then the final piece of the III is that there has to be some kind of method of evaluation, some sort of accounting of participation and meaningful contribution to the discussion or activity or that sort of thing. And so what we did with this, and we were concerned initially that kind of following up on participation would actually be the onerous part of III, particularly with a relatively large residency. And so what we did was we developed this rubric which basically just lays out expectations, kind of defines what a meaningful contribution to the discussion is. And this was shared via Slack with the residents early on so that they knew the expectations. And this was very much a little bit of a culture change, actually, from as far as taking education into the virtual realm like this. And early on, we found that after about like week 1, week 2 or so, we'd have to kind of use that @user function to call out people, like call on people to respond who hadn't participated in the discussion as of yet, and then often had to follow that up with some emails and like a face-to-face of, you know, hey, Dr. LaFollette, are you going to participate in the discussion, that sort of thing. But with each iteration of it, the residents have become have really bought in more and more each time, such that now it's much more so you just occasionally have to call on somebody in the virtual group of, hey, what do you think about this? Or, you know, what do you know of the evidence of that? And the residents are there's a ton less policing. It's much more accepted and people readily participate and kind of understand what the meaningful contribution is. We're doing our annual program evaluation, and the feedback that we got from the residents on this, because this has been kind of the first full year that we've done this, they enjoy it. I mean, some of them will even comment and say, you know, I didn't really like this, but I found it to be valuable and I got a lot out of it, and sometimes get more out of it than I did do didactics and grand rounds and that sort of thing. So it's just another component of education to kind of diversify your approach.
We have a lot we still need to talk about when it comes to what's the best way to use this technology. Is it the small groups that we have currently? Thanks. Is it the small groups that are set up currently? Is it using all junior residents together, all senior residents together? We're going to leave this Slack workspace up, and the 4 of us will continue to have it give us notifications, and we can continue to moderate. If anyone tries to use this technology, we'd love to know how it's going elsewhere. If you guys have any other ideas or questions about it, we can take some now, but also this will continue to exist. Please feel free to use the participation rubric or the example of the case for your own use going forward. Are there any questions?
Yeah, so we have a different faculty mentor for each small group. So generally, we'll have one faculty facilitate one small group. And we've had generally the same core of 6 or 7 faculty members kind of rotate through depending on what other responsibilities they have. So we haven't tried yet having sort of a more longitudinal experience with one person, sort of like pre-assigning residents into a group ahead of time. That would be interesting to see if that might form a different relationship and therefore have more open communication by the end of the year. That's an interesting tack to take. So.
Did you replace in-room lecture time with this, and if so, how much?
Yes, so we replaced 1 hour. So it's basically a month-long course of time where we can have that discussion, and we take 1 hour of grand rounds off because of it. Total for the month, yeah. And that we actually polled the residents, so we have some research on this that we're still working on analyzing a little bit, but what we have found is that the residents thought it was worth around an hour to an hour and a quarter of effort, which was pretty much equivalent to what the moderators thought as well.
Do they have abilities to create quizzes or surveys?
So you can add on. We have not done this as of yet, but you can add on polls within the Slack application. There are like add-on applications within the application, and you can form up polls within that. And I think that there are third-party vendors where you could put in like a multiple choice question. And I know there are other institutions that use Slack, and they use it more primarily to distribute like an educational resource and then they can distribute a question based, like a multiple choice question based on that.
Is the discussion expected to happen at a certain time, or is it just
Ongoing. Whenever that's one of the nice things about the format as well, is that it is just in time. It's ready when the residents are ready to learn. And so moderators will typically respond to a resident response or question within a period of 24 hours or so, sometimes very quickly, depending on what the moderator is doing. The resident response also it can vary depending on when they get time available.
Just in addition to the question about using Slack beyond III, we use the residency leadership team uses it for communication and you can have there's different channels for grand rounds, recruitment, that sort of thing. I think each of us have have varying private channels that we use. I have one with just the chief residents for when they just want to bounce something to me and don't want to bug the other APDs with something, and it works well. It's an interesting, it's a very quick and easy way to communicate and bounce ideas off of each other and that sort of thing.
To the first question as well, we have had residents start using it elsewise. The residents created their own air care orientation curriculum channel there, and there's resident to resident teaching that occurs that's case-based. It's very similar to what we do with the monthly III. That is more informal and optional, but all the residents have participated pretty robustly, actually. Any other thoughts or questions? Oh, yeah, sure.
So the other thing, and that we started this kind of when we were introducing the technology just to get people used to it, but have continued it. There's a channel we have used. I think most residents in the room can say that I'm sure there's a WhatsApp group or a text chain of your peers that sometimes cases go out on, and we kind of wanted to capitalize on that familiarity with that use of kind of bouncing ideas off people and insert some attendings into that. So we have a channel that is just, it's called Cases We Ponder, and it's just cases that the resident or the faculty had struggled with that day and want to talk about what they should have done or what they could do. And then people will post papers they're using to provide an evidence-based answer to the question. It's obviously used more by some people and less by others, but it's another avenue to kind of capitalize on this platform.
Thank you all very much. Feel free to continue to ask any questions on this if you have them. It's going to be available in perpetuity. So, great. Thank you.